my family has always been in the wine for work, for business, and for passion, not for hobby. They started many years ago. I'm the eighth generation, carrying on obviously after the sales of Folonari and concentration on Rufino and on the estate. We came to the point in year 2000 where my family was too big. So we were too many members, different ideas. So we finally decided to go through a major family division. And me and my father wanted to concentrate into something smaller in terms of volume, but only dedicated to fine wines. So right now, we created a group of estates. I call them estates, but they are basically individual properties that have their own vineyards, their own cellar, and make their own wine in different locations of Tuscany. So we have five of them. Rosa, you mentioned a couple of them before. And our idea is to get the best out of our region and make interesting wines because that is the future. People are drinking less again, as I said before, but they want to drink better wine.
Welcome to this special Clubhouse session of the Italian Wine Podcast. Listen in as members of the Italian wine community engage in fascinating conversations about contemporary wine topics. If you enjoyed the show, please consider donating through ItalianWinePodcast.com. And remember to subscribe and rate the Italian Wine Podcast wherever you get your pods.
Hi everyone, my name is Beatrice Motterle and welcome to Italian Wine Clubhouse Ambassadors Corner. Our Clubhouse has been ranking the top amongst Italian wine podcast shows. The show's concept is to let Italian wine ambassadors have the opportunity to interview their favorite producers. This is an episode that gives them a free hand to ask any questions to their selected producer. This session is recorded and will be released in Italian Wine Podcast to reach more listeners, and especially for those who cannot participate due to time zone differences. Our host today is Roza Zharmukhambetova, our Italian wine ambassador from Almaty. She started her journey in wine in Beijing, working for a wine importing company, focused on wines from Chile. Later, she decided to focus on Italian wines. In particular, that's how she ended up with us passing the VIA program in Verona in 2024. Later last year, she joined the Italian Wine Podcast team, as me. She is also a certified Valpolicella specialist, Langhe Wines ambassador, and Italian wine scholar within Wine Scholar Guild. Today, she's gonna interview Giovanni Folonari from Tenute di Nozzolo. So, Roza, are you ready for our 3 ritual questions?
Yes, I'm ready. Hello, everyone.
Hello. How did you discover the wines of the Folonari estate?
I don't remember when exactly, but if I'm not mistaken, my first encounter with the Folonari estate happened during a visit to Florence when I wanted to see my friend there. And back then, I was just beginning to explore Italian wine more seriously. And I remember trying beautiful Chianti Classico first. And then later I tried Brunello di Montalcino from Tenute La Fuga. And back then, actually, I had no idea that both of the wines came from the same group. So it's not just one winery, actually. We're going to talk about several wineries, all located across Tuscany. And then I knew that all of these wineries belonged to one group.
Why did you select Giovanni as your featured producer?
So later, when I started learning more about these states, I became fascinated by the Folonari family's long history in Italian winemaking and also by Giovanni's personal journey. We're going to talk about it later. And during Vin Italy last year, our mutual friend, Irina Mihailenka, she introduced me to Giovanni. At first, I felt really intimidated, and I think I should thank Irina a lot for making this interview happen, because I'd be too intimidated to approach Giovanni myself. But during Vin Italy, when we first met in person, what stood out to me was how relaxed and approachable he was. The conversation was really fun and really easygoing. So when Irina mentioned to him that I wanted to feature Giovanni as a guest on our podcast, he kindly agreed. Here we are. And I'm very, very happy and honored to have him with us today.
I can hear it from your voice that you are so happy about it. What are the learning objectives that we should expect from this interview?
So, in today's interview, we will get to know the Folonari family legacy and Giovanni's personal journey in the wine world. We are going to gain a clear overview of the Folonari estates, the wine styles they produce, and their unique identities across Tuscany. And we are going to understand how the group is investing in future growth, sustainability, and also new opportunities across the global markets.
That sounds great and amazing. Let me say hi to Giovanni also because he's already here with us. And it's time for me to mute myself and turning the microphone to Roza. Have a nice interview, guys. We will hear us later.
All right. Thank you, Bea. Okay, here we are again. Hello, Giovanni. Welcome to our podcast. And as I already said, I'm really, really happy that you found time to join us today.
Well, hi, Rosa. It was not difficult for me to find time for such an important chat with you, and I have to thank Beatrice to organize this also. And the only question I have: why were you intimidated by me? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. What was it because of the wines I make, or because of the looks I have that sometimes might seem mean or something? I don't know. That's funny.
Okay, well, first of all, the beautiful wines, the long history of the family, I guess. But I didn't realize that you have a stern look, or I don't know. It was just when you meet some winemakers who come from families with a long legacy, with a huge background, I think it's kind of normal to feel intimidated. But I'm really happy that we met personally.
Yeah, me too. Very, very happy. That was great.
Okay, right now let's start our conversation. So let's start from the beginning. Can you briefly tell us about the history of the Folonari family and where the family comes from?
I will try to be brief, although the story is long, but I will wrap it up as much as I can. So, first of all, I would like to say that my family has always been in the wine for work, for business, and for passion, not for hobby. So we think that the wine business, especially when fine wines are involved, it's a very delicate business and you have to stay behind it all the time. So you cannot do it as a second job or as a hobby. It's very often today to find people that buy themselves a property in this beautiful landscape we have and grow vines and make wine for fun. I mean, it's great, but that's not what my family did. And they started many years ago. I'm the eighth generation. And of course, my family went through many different phases during their history. It is true that this is not something new because there are a lot of families that traditionally have been carrying on this business in Italy, in many regions for many generations. So I'm not the only one, but definitely eight generations, it's a long time. What I always liked about my family is that although we come from the old world and therefore very often we are really sticking to our traditions and we don't want to change, we pretend that because we have that long history, the consumer should change their attitude, and this is very wrong. My family has always been following what the consumer wanted, and for that reason, they changed accordingly. So it's never too late to make a move, to change, to make a different wine, to make a different style. This is very important because people change their attitude on wine drinking, and so we have to follow them. Now, for this reason, my family started with the Folonari brand that was named after our last name. Was mostly involving beverage wines, so entry level, low level wines. And in that category, until 60, 70 years ago, most of the beverage wine didn't have a label, didn't have a brand. So my family was the first one that put a label and a name behind an everyday wine. So that was also new. And then in the early 1900s, in 1913, my great grandfather bought Ruffino, which was one of the biggest players in Tuscany, producing Chianti and Chianti Classico. And that winery has been in my family for over 100 years. Now, as you probably know, the family, it's nice because you have a history to tell, you have a tradition, and it's beautiful to carry on a business for so many generations. But on the other hand, the counterpart is that every generation, the number of family members increases. And in a regular business, you choose your partners based on the capacities or the skills. In a family business, if they have your last name, they have the same rights of you to be in the business. And sometimes they don't have the skills, and it's very hard to convince them when you have to move on to certain strategies because they want to put some of their ideas in the strategy. But if they don't have the skills, it's complicated. So, plus, you have an increased number of family members every generation. So, obviously, for these reasons, my family went through several family divisions throughout the years. And also the change of the consumption of wine, people drinking less but better wine. So my family adapted. So my grandfather sold the Folonari, he concentrated on Rufino and started buying estates, properties, which had their own vineyards and grew their own grapes to make the wine. So the fine wine category, you need to have your vineyards and control the whole process if you want to make a fine wine. Maybe I can tell you wine details later, but I don't want to be too long in this story. So carrying on, obviously, after the sales of Folonari and concentration on Rufino and on the estate, we came to the point in the year 2000 where my family was too big. So we were too many members, different ideas. So we finally decided to go through a major family division. And me and my father wanted to concentrate into something smaller in terms of volume, but only dedicated to fine wines. So right now, we created a group of estates. I call them estates, but they are basically individual properties that have their own vineyards, their own cellar, and make their own wine in different locations of Tuscany. So we have 5 of them. Rosa, you mentioned a couple of them before. And our idea is to get the best out of our region and make interesting wines because that is the future. People are drinking less again, as I said before, but they want to drink better wine. And believe me, if you have passion in what you're doing, it's a lot more fun to make wines like these that people enjoy, and it's a lot more rewarding than to make wines that very often people drink because they are at low cost, or like it was in the past in the Chianti Classico area, people will buy the wine because they would love that fiasco, that straw bottle, but not for the product that was inside it. So it's a lot nicer, although it's a smaller operation.
And just now you mentioned how difficult it is when you have a big family and how difficult it is to come to the same ideas, to have the same vision. Well, wine still is a family affair for you. Could you please tell us what role does each family member play in the business today?
Well, now the family is much smaller, so it's easier. In the past, before the year 2000, me and my father, along with one of my uncles that was part time following this, we were the only ones involved in production. All the others were taking care of other aspects of the company, financial, marketing, and sales and the commercial part. And I forgot to mention before, because you asked me, my family is originally from Lombardy. So until 2000, all my family, except my father and myself, of course, were living in Brescia. So it was very complicated to get along because all the management was in Brescia, but all the production was here in Tuscany. So me and my father had to go to Brescia at least once a week and meet with all the rest of the family. And so things, thank God, have changed. And now the family is much smaller. So it's me, my father, which is still partially working. I mean, he comes to the office every day. He's 95 years old. He just left 10 minutes ago. He was here next door, and so that's great because that keeps him young and keeps him with that energy going. And then I have my 2 sisters. I have 2 sisters. One of them, she's just partner, but she and of course she takes part of all the major meetings and strategies, but she lives in Rome and she's a journalist. She works for ANSA. Whereas my older sister that graduated, Francesca, in economics, and she was always into the business administration. Now she helps me out with the administrative part of the company, and also she manages directly all our hospitality because in our estates we do have homes, villas, or boutique hotel because we want people to come over and spend time in our places to see where the wine comes from.
Hmm. And I also have a question for later about the hospitality exactly.
Yeah,
And
we will talk about that later. No
yeah.
problem.
And here I have a question for you. You said it's always fun to do something when you have passion for it. But my question is, growing up surrounded by wine, generations of people making wine, producing wine, did you always know that you end up in the family business? Or were there times when you wanted to take a different turn in your life and do something else, not wine?
Oh, that's a tough question. I will tell you a funny story. Usually, when you're a young kid, very young, and you ask for a little bit of wine because you're curious, your parents say, no, you're too young. Now, in my case, it was the opposite. When I was young, my father was saying, Giovanni, try some wine. It's good for you. And I didn't like wine until I was like 13, 14 years old. And then slowly came to the point where now it's impossible for me to have a meal without at least a glass of wine. So that was kind of funny. But despite that, my father never forced me to be in the business. He said, this business, like most of them, is something that you have to get in if you really like it and if you have passion. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. I mean, the company is yours, you can be partner and do something else. And he was absolutely right. But if I had an alternative, if I didn't have the wine, I would have definitely become a mechanical engineer. I love mechanics. I love to work with my hands, and I like anything that has a motor engine in it and things like that. So I could have been a mechanical engineer, but I really like, not only I like wine, but I like the production, all the steps that are required to make a wine, starting from the vineyard. I love agriculture. I love grape growing and winemaking. And I really love the place where I am. I think I'm very spoiled and lucky to be in such a beautiful place. So, for this reason, I really wanted to go on with the business. I thought it was a good direction. And so, although my father didn't force me to do that, thank God, I decided to do it because I really like it.
Mhm. And so you studied enology and viticulture at UC Davis and worked at Robert Mondavi Winery. So how did you decide to go to the US, and what was it like coming from a traditional Italian wine family and suddenly like being immersed in Napa Valley's like innovation driven wine scene?
Well, that's an interesting question. It would probably need a very long answer, but I'll try to wrap it up. So, well, first of all, in Italy, we didn't have back then, I'm talking about the 80s, such a specific major on winemaking. The only thing I could have done was major of agriculture, which was general agriculture. And honestly, knowing that the rest of my life would probably be, and it is, in Italy, it was interesting to have an experience somewhere else. So the alternative was either France or California. So it was either Bordeaux or UC Davis. Now, at the beginning, my father gave me the choice, and I chose Bordeaux because I figured it's closer to my hometown. I can take the train on the weekends and go back home and see my friends, my girlfriend, and my family. Typical Italian male, which I think a little wrong. I mean, we are such mama's boys. And so that's why I decided to do that at first. But then my father said, okay, before you decide, you go there, you see it, and you do everything. And I was not fluent in French. I liked Bordeaux. It's beautiful, incredible experience. But then I thought to myself, I said, well, Giovanni, I mean, it's only going to be 3, 4, 5 years of your life. The rest of your life, you're going to be in Italy. Would you rather stay in Bordeaux or in California? And then I made my choice and I said, forget it. Even if it's further away, I want to go to California. And I really, really happy about this choice. I didn't regret it at all, even though the distance, of course, was much more. And not only my experience in the university in terms of winemaking was very interesting for two reasons. First of all, it was very specific on wine, like something we didn't have in Italy, as I said before. Second of all, it's an experience done in another country. So there is always something to learn from what people do in other countries. We cannot assume that because we've been making wine since the Romans, we are the best in the world. That's very wrong assumption. Just like I said before. So there is always something to learn. So this was very interesting for me, for my background. And the second reason that goes beyond the university itself, like I previously mentioned, is the life lesson to learn to stay by yourself and to manage things by yourself, from the laundry to the cooking to anything, without having mom there that is ready to take care of her boy. And this was such a great experience. It really helped me to grow, because believe me, in Italy, the boys are, even today with the new generations, they're still like that. And this is wrong. You need to learn how to manage and to get things done on your own without the help of your mother or your parents in general. So that was a very, very, very good experience I had in Davis for this too.
Yeah, and here I agree with you. Like immersing yourself in a different culture, first of all. Second of all, living abroad away from your family. It always teaches you a lot of things and a lot of life skills that you are going to use both at work, in your personal life. I agree with you strongly on that. And now I would like to move on to the wine and to the wineries. So Tenuto Folonari includes some of the Tuscany's most iconic territories like Chianti Classico, Montalcino, Maremma, among others. And for those who may not be familiar with the group, because later, once the episode is released, we not only have the wine professionals listening to us, but also to some wine lovers. So, for those who may not be familiar with the group, could you please give us an overview of the estates you manage? Like how many hectares, how many bottles you produce annually, and the wine styles?
Sure. Okay, so after the year 2000, when we had that major family division that I mentioned before, me and my father decided to concentrate only on estates with homegrown grapes to make our own fine wines. Now, our idea was to go and in the most interesting and strategic areas of Tuscany. Now it's complicated because Tuscany has so many interesting areas for wine production, but we picked a few of them that you mentioned also. So we have 5 different estates, all individual, with their own vineyards and their own cellar. The total amount of vineyards we have today is it's about 250 hectares, which will be what, 600 acres, 580 acres, something like that. We make a total of 1.2 million bottles, not cases, bottles. And so that's our size. Now, the largest estate we have, which is also our headquarter, is Nozzole. Now, Nozzole is located right before Greve. Greve is right in the heart of the Chianti Classico between Florence and Siena. Now, why did I say headquarters? Because as I mentioned before, the wines are produced and aged and the grapes are grown in every single estate. Then once the wine is made, we bottle the wine and we take it over to Nozzole where we have the warehouse. And so everything ships from one place. And that's where we have our main offices. Of course, each of the property has its office, has a responsible person that is always connected with our winemaker and grape grower. And so they get the directions and then they make the wine. Now, going back to the estate, so we have Nozzole, which is the largest one and mostly produce Chianti Classico. So in the 3 versions, the vintage, the Riserva and the Gran Selezione. But we also make a super Tuscan that has been around for a while. It's called Il Pareto, and it's 100% Cabernet Sauvignon, so quite different from the super Tuscans produced in this area, which most of the times have Sangiovese involved. And then we also make Vinsanto, the olive oil, and a young fruity Chardonnay with no oak called Le Brunique. Now, if we move just a little further, we go to the place where I live. I live in a house in the middle of the vineyards, right above Greve Chianti, and that's the Cabreo estate. Now, Cabreo was our first Super Tuscan and one of the first in general, because the first vintage we released it was 1982, and back then there were not many of these wines. The reason why they're called Super Tuscans is because this nickname was given by a journalist, because at the time we didn't have even the classification of IGT, which is a regional classification. They were just table wines, because in the area where most of them came from back then, which was the Chianti Classico area with few exceptions, one in Bolgheri and others, were basically wines that could not fall into the historical category in the area, because they had different grape varieties in the blend, the different requirements. And so back then, I remember in the Chianti Classico, we were forced to use 20% white varieties in the blend. You might think, wait a minute, Giovanni, white varieties for a red wine? Yes. The reason why this was done was to make the wine easier to drink. Very light wine. I mean, it's part of our history. I'm not ashamed of it, but a lot of people were buying it to keep the bottle and put a candle in it more than the wine itself. So we felt it was interesting, important for us to do something else. We could do much better, especially with one of these historical varieties in the area, which was Sangiovese. We said, could we make 100% Sangiovese wines? No. Could we blend it in instead of Trebbiano and Malvasia with maybe Cabernet Sauvignon Merlot? No. So we had to make these wines that were just table wines. Now, table wine is the broadest and cheapest category where all the jug wines are in. So it was kind of a contradictory, the fact that having these high-end wines in such a low category. That's why it was given this nickname Super Tuscan. Now, the Cabreo was not the first, but was one of the first, because 1982, we were very few of us producing such wines. And this year we celebrated the 40th anniversary, because we just released the 2022 vintage. So 40 years have gone by, and that was such an achievement. Now, the Cabrera estate, it's slightly smaller than Nozzole. It's 45 hectares of vineyard, Nozzole is 75. And we only make Super Tuscan. So we make the Cabrera Borgo, which is the red, the blend. It's Sangiovese, Cabernet Sauvignon Merlot. Then we make La Pietra. That was quite unique, because when we came out with La Pietra, which is 100% Chardonnay fermented and aged in oak, there was no such thing in the area as a aged complex white wine. White wines had a really bad reputation. The reason why was because people were not able to produce them correctly. We didn't have the technology, we didn't have refrigeration during fermentation. The weather here is very hot, and so for all these reasons, nobody ever produced before that. And still now, they make very, very few of this kind of wine. So La Pietra is the second Cabreo. Then we have a third Cabreo, which is also very unusual for the area, because it's 100% Pinot Noir. It's called Cabreo Black, and it's very unusual, very difficult, trust me, to grow Pinot Noir here. In order to get a decent product to make an interesting wine, you need to remove most of the grapes from the vines and pick really, really early, because the climate here is very hot, and in the latest years is getting warmer and warmer. Now, going further away, then we have La Fuga that you mentioned before, Rosa. La Fuga, it's our property in Montalcino. So it's a very tiny property, not for Montalcino, but for us it is, because it's only 9 hectares of vineyards, 7.5 of which is Brunello. So we make a total of about 30,000 bottles, but I would like to call it like a boutique Brunello. Very small production, but because the area, well, of course, the knowledge too, but especially because of the area where the vineyards are, it's such an incredible area, and that's thanks to Mother Nature. And so we have good quality fruit, and we can make very, very interesting wines. And there we make the Rosso, the Brunello, and in the best vintages, also the Brunello Riserva. Now, if we move close to the sea, we go to the number 3 estate, which is the number 4 estate, sorry, which is Campo al Mare. Now, Campo al Mare means land by the sea. It is a winery, an estate that we created with my father from scratch. So it didn't exist before. We bought the land, planted the vineyards, and started making the wine. And this is in Bolgheri. Now, Bolgheri, we always believed that Bolgheri was such a high potential area for making wines that are different from the traditional Tuscan wines, but very, very interesting with a very strong identity. And so that was a beautiful alternative, to give to the public something different. And we saw the success that some of these major players, of course, we're talking about the Antinori, the Incisa family, they came out with such incredible wines that today are considered iconic. And so we really saw the potential. Another player like Angelo Gaia, which is, of course, is really good. He came all the way from Piedmont to invest in Bolgheri. I mean, he saw the potential too. So that was very, very interesting venture. We started making this wine in 2003, so it's fairly recent. But because of the style of the wine, because of the name of the winery that we picked, Campo al Mare, which is easy to remember and makes sense because it means land by the sea, and because of the style of the wine, this, especially in Italy and in Europe, but in Italy in particular, and in particular among the younger crowds, it's an incredible wine. So people go crazy about this wine, and that makes me really, really happy. Now, the last property that we have is in Maremma. It's called Vigna Porrona. It's south of Montalcino, near Paganico, in the Montecucco area. Montecucco, it's one of the thousands denominations in Tuscany that obviously is not as famous as Montalcino, Brunello, or others. But it's a great place in terms of landscape and climate. So we make very interesting wines. We make both the Montecucco and the Maremma EGT. Now, the Sangiovese grown there is very different from the one grown in Montalcino, although it's not far apart, and completely different from the one we grow in Nozzole. So what we wanted to show was we have a variety of wine that are all interesting because they all have a strong identity and they're also different from each other. So we are so in love with our region, with Toscana, that we believe that if you work correctly, you can really make interesting wines coming from different areas and very different from each other.
Here I've got a little bit of a geeky question. So Folonari estates are spread all across Tuscany, and could you tell us how does the winemaking in a coastal area like Bolgheri, for example, how can you compare it to more inland, hillier areas like Cabreo? How can you compare these two areas?
It's impossible to make a logical comparison because there's so many variables. Now, what I can tell you, if we want to sort of wrap it up, is that there are major differences in the climate, in the microclimate, and in the soil. Now, if we take Bolgheri, for example, and compare it to Nozzole and Cabreo or La Fuga, the major difference is the soil. That we have a lot more, it's a looser soil. It does have limestone like we do in the other areas, but it doesn't have many rocks. It's a very deep soil and very fertile. So the vigor of the vines is much stronger. So that means the yield is more, and that means you need to control the production. Let me explain briefly. The vine needs to be in balance with its vigor. So if you have a very vigorous vine, you need to leave more buds when you prune to let the vine pull out the energy. And obviously, if you leave more buds, that means more grapes. And so you really need to do massive green harvest. That means removing the green grapes before they go to maturation. So right after setting, before veraison, basically, when they're still green, because otherwise you would overproduce. Overproducing would mean dilute all the components that are in the berries, and therefore that's not going to help you to make a fine wine. The other difference is the climate. As I said, the climate in Bolgheri is milder because of the influence of the sea. So it never gets that hot in the daytime and never gets that cold at night. The difference between summer and winter are less. But what's the biggest difference is nights are warmer. And because there is not that sharp climate and temperature changes, this is not, at least under my opinion, a good place to grow Sangiovese. I mean, we love Sangiovese. It's our main variety. It has a very high potential. It's not easy to replicate it elsewhere. That helps us make wines even more unique, but you cannot just grow it everywhere. So Bolgheri, it's an area where Sangiovese, at least for my experience, doesn't give good results. On the other hand, there are varieties, mostly Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Merlot, and Petit Verdot, these four, but also Syrah, that can give you very interesting results in Bolgheri. So that's a major difference. Now, if you go to the other estates, Nozzole and Cabreo, as I mentioned before, they're very close to each other. So there is not much difference in climate, and the altitude are pretty much the same, but there is a huge difference in the soil, meaning Cabreo, we have a variable mixed soil with a lot of rocks and limestone, similar somehow to the one we have in Montalcino. Nozzole, that is 7 kilometers apart, we have a soil with a lot of clay. So among our estates is the one that has the lowest vigor. So very, very low vigor in the vines, and you need often to irrigate because having the clay in the soil means the soil is not that deep, so the roots cannot go deep down. And so if you have a dry season, it would be very easy to the vines to go under stress, which is something we want to avoid if we want to have a good crop.
And it's fascinating, like how two states, they are located not far away from each other, but at the same time they give very different wines and very different grapes, crops that lead to different styles. And let's go back to Tenuta di Nozzole, so the largest estate. So your name is now on the Gran Selezione from Nozzole. Can you share the story behind this wine? Why exactly this wine carries your name and what it personally represents for you?
That's a funny. I have a funny story about this. Well, first of all, the Gran Selezione appellation, which it's a very important appellation for us, but most people don't know about it because unfortunately, us Italians didn't do a very good job in sending the message. So still today, a lot of people don't have a clear idea of what Gran Selezione is. Basically, the Gran Selezione is an appellation of the Chianti Classico that we wanted to create in order to have people in the future say, oh, Gran Selezione, those are good wines. So that was our final ambition. Now, the only appellation, historical appellation, where people have this type of thought is, of course, Brunello di Montalcino. Now, the other reason why the consortium wanted to create this appellation was because the consortium felt sorry for the fact that a lot of wines produced within the Chianti Classico area are the top wines worldwide recognized, but they're not Chianti Classico. They're IGT. So now let's forget about the discussion. What about 40, 50 years ago when we asked to change the rules and you said no? So that's what happened. Now, obviously, the idea was good. So create an appellation very strict. You have to follow strict rules, otherwise you cannot call your wine Gran Selezione. Well, first of all, in the DOCG, you have a blind tasting. The consortium does a blind tasting. So on top of all the requirements, physical and legal, you do have a blind tasting where actually people have a sensory evaluation and decide if the wine is good enough or not. And of course, the parameters used for the Gran Selezione are a lot more strict than the ones used for the Riserva or for the regular Chianti Classic. Just to give you an idea, when we first came out with Gran Selezione in 2013, I think over 70 wineries applied and they sent a sample and half of them were rejected. So very tough quality parameters in order to enter. 6 more months of aging compared to the Riserva. So instead of 24 months, it's 30 months. And the other most important thing is that the entire production needs to come from your own vineyard. So only estate bottled wine. This rule was created to keep away all the cooperative sellers and the big major producers that buy bulk wine from this category. Now, the idea was great. Unfortunately, the message hasn't been sent that well, but we really believe in this wine because this is the maximum reward that you can give to a Chianti Classico. Obviously, to make this wine, we keep the best of the best quality of the grapes and we make very small quantities. Now, we wanted to give it a name at first, like, a Riserva is called La Forra, named after the vineyard where it originally came from. But we didn't want to give a vineyard name again. So we said, why don't we put our name, like saying to the final consumer, I put my face on this wine, my signature. Obviously, the idea was good, but my father, which is typical, said, well, it should be my name on it. And I'm very diplomatic, not like most young, well, not that young anymore, but anyway. And I said, well, sure, that whatever. I mean, it's fine. And then my older sister came in and she said, forget it, no way. Giovanni's the future. You are 90 years old, no, 87, how much it was at the time. So, I mean, let's look at the future. You're the present, but Giovanni's the future, so his signature should be on it. And so that's why my signature was on there.
So I was mute, but I was laughing a lot when your father said that his name was supposed to be there. So actually, your sisters also advocated for you. Okay,
Yeah, I mean that's
that's
that's typical. My sister is not as diplomatic as I am. She's very, tranchant, like they say in France. And so that was funny. And it was funny to see my father's face. He was a little, a little sad when she said that. But of course he accepted. I mean, his name, my name, as long as it's one of the family which owns the place and is behind it, it's fine with us.
okay. I see. I'm so excited that we are having today's interview. Like as I said before, you're such a charismatic person. And I would continue with my questions. I've got tons of questions for you, but I want to move on to the market side a little bit. So, your wines, they're well known not only in Italy, but also abroad in foreign markets. So, what percentage of your production is exported, and which are your top export markets for now?
Okay, so a company like mine, which I would define it as a medium-sized producer, okay, around 1 million bottles. Usually, a Tuscan company like mine usually exports at least 60 or even 70% of the production. It is a lot easier to export because you have one person for or importer or agent for one entire country. And very often they pay in advance. Or in Italy, we have our own network with private agents which get paid on the commission, on the percentage. So they place the order and then we have to manage the shipping, the invoicing, and everything. And we have about over 3,000 clients. So it's a lot more complicated to sell in Italy, but I always say we are Italian. So we don't want people that drink Nozzole Chianti Classico Riserva in New York all the time. Then they come to Florence, they don't find my wine. That's something that is not good. Also because obviously in Florence, all the restaurant owners or wine shops, they all know the producers. So if your wines are not there, obviously the client says, well, maybe they're not good enough. And these guys that really know what they're making, they don't have it. And that's not good. Plus, we are Italians. So, to make a long story short, we sell a little over 50% of our production in Italy. Then, after that, our major market by far is United States. Well, there's two reasons. First of all, Americans love our wines, especially the Chianti Classico, but all the Italian wines because they love Italian cuisine and because they like wines that are not only complex and powerful, but they're also elegant and they go well with food. So the second reason is the ambassador. I always say we are a lot of good producers that make outstanding sometimes or excellent wines in most cases in this region and in this country. So what really makes a difference is your ambassadors. Now, obviously the ambassador cannot sell lousy wine and convince people that it's good, but if they have the same quality wine, a good ambassador makes a difference. Now, in the United States, we had a very long term partnership with this importer, which is very famous. It's called Colbrand. And we've been working with them since the late 60s. So, this strong partnership and their ability and skills really helped us to enter the American market big time. So almost 30% of our production is sold in the US. Now, 50 plus 30. So what's left is not much. And we are really working on that because we need to increase that portion. The rest is the rest of the world. I mean, we have very interesting agents and importers, but they're small numbers. Now, let's say the biggest numbers we make beyond the United States and Italy are definitely Europe, especially Switzerland and Belgium, then Canada, Japan, and Southeast Asia. So these are the major areas where we sell our wines.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And we also have many Italian wine ambassadors, like the VA community from Japan and Canada too. Could you please tell us who are your main partners there? Who are your importers there? Just in case if our VA ambassadors want to get your wines, let's say for their wine shops or for the restaurants they work in, so they could find this importer.
Well, we have agents and importers in Canada, but as you know, the wines are sold to the monopoly. And in Canada, we only work in the places where there are the monopolies, mostly with the SAQ in Quebec and with the LCBO in Ontario. So these are the major markets. We do very, very small business in BC. Now, going to the other places, we have a small importer in Japan called Smile Corporation that we've been working with for many, many years. Then in Switzerland, we have Mövenpick, which is the owner of all these big wine shops and hotels. Well, they sold the hotellerie before COVID, but they're very well organized with all the wine shops around Switzerland, and they do a very good job. In Belgium, we have an agent, Robert Brave, that sells to different clients. And in Southeast Asia, we have an agent which also has wine shops called the Wine Merchant. And he lives in Bangkok, but he does business for us in Singapore and in Cambodia and in Vietnam. So these are the major. Then, of course, we have some spot sales every now and then in Australia, very few in France, but we're talking about small numbers.
Mm-hmm. Thank you a lot for such a, I think it's a very practical answer because just in case if we want to find your wines outside of Italy, that information is very useful. And another question that I think should be also very practical. What are the upcoming international wine events or fairs where you'll be participating in? And where can our listeners, especially the importers, the SOMs, the educators, meet you or taste your wines in person in the upcoming months?
Okay, so now it's difficult because there are so many of these organizers and wine lovers or journalists that make nowadays they all make events. So it's difficult to go everywhere, and it's also expensive, very expensive, a big investment. So we alternate. Now, recently we've been working quite a lot with the Gambero Rosso, which is the major Italian, well, the most historical Italian wine guide. They do events for both the Tre Bicchieri, which is the maximum award that they give every year, and with this tour called the Road Show. So we work with them. We did a lot of grand tour of Wine Spectator, then we stopped for a while. Now we'll probably get back in because Wine Spectator is Wine Spectator, so they are worldwide the most famous wine magazine, and so it's very important to work with them and to support them. Another person that we do work a lot with is James Suckling, because James, that previously used to work for the Wine Spectator, he went on his own and he did a great job, especially in Asia. So he chose a different format than the traditional, and he's quite successful. And plus, he's in love with Tuscan wines, and so that also is a big plus for us. So we work with him too. And the other thing we do, which is very unusual for Italians, and I'm very proud of this, we are part of this association called Grandi Marchi, means big brands. Now, this group was created back in 2004, and the idea was have a group of wineries that they need to be family owned in order to be part of this group, coming from all over Italy, so from almost every region of Italy. We are 18, and we go around the world to do events and to show people our wines, our region, our styles, and everything. And this is quite successful. It's funny because The reason why I told you this at the beginning, quite unusual, is because Italians, unlike the French, they like to fight on their own, and sometimes in a not very correct way, because they fight. They go around, sell their wines, and they say, no, don't buy Giovanni's wine, is not good, which is very wrong. But usually Italians, they don't team up. In fact, when we first created this group of Grandi Marchi, some Italian journalists that very expert, big experts on Italian wines, they say, they created this group. That's interesting, but they will not last more than 1 year. And after 20 years that we celebrated last year, we're still there. We're still very, very strong with this group, and we do events around the world to show our wines. Obviously, if I go and do an event by myself, it's not so easy to get so much attention. If I go and do an event of the Gambaro or James Sackling or the Wine Spectator or whoever, there is thousands of wineries, and so it's difficult to get the attention. But if you are 18 Italian producers from historical families, family owned business, that definitely gets the attention. And 18 wineries, it's a good number. So people that come over and they taste, they can remember your wines, which is the whole purpose of all this investment.
Thank you a lot for your answer. And it's almost time for us to wrap it up, to wrap the episode. But before we do that, I need to ask you about the future projects. So the company announced over 9 million euros in new investments, including the new wine cellar at Cabreo. So what facilities are you building there, and how will they improve the operations at the winery or even the wine quality?
Okay, so I want to do a brief introduction. Why do we need to invest so much? Mostly enhancing the image of the product, because there is an improvement in quality, but mostly is for the image. Because, as I said previously, people are drinking less, especially nowadays, because for some reason there are campaigns all around Europe created by people that have absolutely no skills and knowledge, but let's forget about that. So basically, it looks like the wine is not good for you. So obviously, if you drink 3 bottles a day, it is not. But if you drink a glass a day, which is part of the Mediterranean diet, and is one of the reasons why in Italy people live so long. My grandmother died at 105 and she was drinking every day a glass of wine. So I think this is a very wrong assumption. But unfortunately, with all the media and the communication that you have today, it's very easy to get the wrong message to everybody. So basically, because of this, it's even more important to concentrate on small quantities of high-end fine wine. Now, a fine wine to be considered such, you need the quality, definitely, and for that, the most important investment, especially if it's a red wine, but usually always is in the vineyard. So it's impossible to make a high-end wine with bad fruit. Okay? So the fruit needs to be perfect. By perfect means perfectly mature, uniformly mature, and healthy, and with the good parameters, which is not always easy to achieve, especially nowadays with these crazy weather changes and stuff. So, this is very important, but also to be able to have people remember your wine. It is also by the experience. Well, first of all, when people spend money on a bottle of wine, they want to know what's behind it. They don't want to have something that is fantasy. They hate fantasy, and they are absolutely right. They want to know what's behind all of it. So they want to see the place of origin, if they have the chance to come over. And that is the reason why we invested so much also on the real estate and on the hospitality. We want people to spend time in the middle of our properties, the middle of the vineyards, and possibly see how beautiful the landscape is, but also every portion of that winery. And obviously, the cellar, it's a big, big portion of it. And it is true that in Cabrera, we had a cellar before, we did have the technology, we had the sorting table, we had the temperature control and fermentation, we had a good oak for aging, but the location was not that glamorous. So we didn't want to do a total show off, but we definitely wanted to make something that people will remember. So the looks today for the luxury and for the fine wines is also very important, and the origin too. So our idea is to have people come over, visit our estate, look at the vineyards, visit the cellar, and spend time in this beautiful landscape. That's why we are investing so much. And the cellar of Cabreo was already existing. We already had the technology. It didn't look as nice. Now it's going to be something really, really interesting, different from many others, which is something that really attracts the attention of people, because today, to convince somebody to come over your place, especially if it's somebody from the trade, you need more than just a good wine. You need everything else that can generate curiosity and have people come over. At the same time, people that are not used to drink wine, or they drink wine, but eventually, and there are so many names, so many appellations out there. It's really complicated for them to remember your name. But definitely, if they would spend some time at your place, they will never forget, because it's not just the wine; it's an experience. So that is the reason why we're investing so much in this category. And now, the other reason why we're investing right now, it is very expensive and a big sacrifice, especially right now when the business is not doing so great because of all the problems, the drinking, the tariffs in the United States, and a bunch of other things. But that's the best time to invest, because for two reasons. First of all, you might get a better deal from all the suppliers, because being a hard moment, not many people are building cellars nowadays, so you can get a better deal on equipment, on other things. Second of all, it's a beautiful image that you show to the world, because you say, look, I mean, this is a tough moment for all these wine producers, and these guys are there, they're investing. So they should be good guys. So, like they say, when the going gets tough, the tough gets going. So that is the reason why we are investing so much right now in all our properties, but especially in the Cabreo with the cellar and with the high-end boutique hotel. We have two high-end boutique hotels right in the middle of the vineyards. Very few rooms, 11 rooms each, but luxury. We didn't want to do the typical Italian way, that you think you have the history so you can leave everything like it was 30, 50 years ago. People don't want that. People, they want, 5 star is 5 star. They go into a room, they want to see the room, the mattress, the bathroom, all things that were not part of this tradition. So we wanted to make something very, very luxury, but not away from the mood of the area. So connections with the mood, but in a modern, clean, and luxurious way. And I have to say they're quite successful. Not only we have a very high rating, because both Borgo del Cabreo and Pietra del Cabreo have 9.8 on booking.com, but we're always overbooked. So that's good news. And then, of course, we have Nozzole. We have a villa, but we rent the whole villa of Nozzole for weekly events, so families or weddings or things like that. And then we have a smaller villa in Nozzole and another one in Montalcino that we also rent weekly. Whereas in Cabrera, we have these two boutique hotels that are just like a hotel.
So other estates, like for example Campo al Mare, they're not open for visits and for stays, or all of these estates are open?
Campo al Mare, it's open for visit and for tastings. We don't have a beautiful cellar to look at. We make wine in a modern building. It's not so romantic at all, but we do have all the equipment. We do have the vineyards. We don't have a house, but we do have a house that has been turned into a restaurant, because we made a partnership with Omar Barsaki, which is the owner of one of the best restaurants in Bolgheri, which is called La Magona, and our good friend from Panzano, Dario Cecchini, the butcher. So the three of us joined forces and we created this very interesting restaurant on the Bolgherese Road called Il Macello di Bolgheri. So that's where we take our clients, we do tastings and things like that, and also at the cellar. But we don't have a complete structure over there. We do have it at La Fuga. It's all tiny, it's all small, but it's very boutique, very nice. We have a house. Underneath the house, we have the cellar. It's very small but gorgeous. We do have a cellar in the middle of the vineyards in Vigna Porrona in Maremma, but we don't really have a house. Well, we do have a house, but the workers live there. So we don't have a villa there, but we do have the cellar as well. And of course, Cabreo and Nozzole, as I mentioned before, we do have all these structures and the cellar and the villa and the other villa and the hotels. Complicated to manage, all of these things, but they're definitely good for the image and rewarding too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope in the future I'll have the possibility to visit the wine cellar. And I also saw on the website actually that for all our listeners, inside among the tasting options, there is an option that is called a life and wine story. So this is the tasting that is led by Giovanni himself. Am I correct?
You're absolutely correct. And very often when I do this tasting, the people that do the tasting, they want to taste through vintages. So they pick maybe the Brunello or the Cabreo or il Pareto or the Riserva Chianti Classico, and we do a vertical tasting, which is very interesting because, obviously I remember all the vintages and I can tell them the differences. And you can also see the aging potential of a wine because very often people will ask you, can this wine age? And the answer, of course, is always yes. I never heard somebody that say, no, drink it now. But you need to prove it, not just with your words. So it's very interesting for these people that want to do the tasting with me that I, show them all these vintages and explain them the vintages. Going back to your first question, Rosa, you're always welcome. So you have my numbers, you have my contacts. Whenever you feel like you want to come down, we'll arrange it and I will personally take care of you with a tour and tasting and everything and lunch or whatever. So I will be more than happy to do that.
Yes, I've got a green light. I'm happy to. So that was the thing that I was waiting for to finish the interview, actually.
I mean it, eh? I'm not just saying it because I'm Italian and I like to talk. Just make sure you text me and we'll get together. I would love to show you around and to spend some time with you.
Thank you a lot. And Beatrice is knocking on our door. So I had more questions for you, but unfortunately, it's time to wrap up for us.
You have to do a part two, guys. It has to be
Sure.
done, yeah, isn't it? Well, thank you, Roza, and thank you, Giovanni. That was such an amazing and in-depth discussion. Really, it was so much fun. And I sincerely thank you both so much also for your time and effort to be here for this interview. So how was it? Was everything fine for both of you?
Yeah. Well, Beatrice, there is something I would like to tell you. You're thanking me, but I have to thank you because every time somebody has ideas like this that allow us producers to explain to people what we do and how our wines. This is a great opportunity for me. So, as I mentioned before, our ambassadors are very, very important. So, I can make the best wine in the world, but if I didn't have people like you, Beatrice or Rosa, I could either drink my wine by myself or keep it in my cellar. So, it is very important for us whenever we get the occasion to have people like you that come up with ideas like these that can enable people to know more about what we do here and about our wine. So thank you very much.
To be
Here
honest
we
and
should
fair, we
thank.
have to thank Stevie Kim for
Yes,
this
exactly.
because she's the mastermind under everything that we do and did and done forever in the Italian Wine Podcast. No, really,
So a
she's
big
a volcanic energy, so we have to thank her for
Where
this.
is she, by the way? She's always
She's,
busy traveling around. No,
yeah. That's why she's
yeah,
not in the office today,
that's too
unfortunately.
bad. No, I've known
Yeah,
Stevie since a very, very long time. She's great. I love her. She's so dedicated.
yeah.
She's so much into the Italian wines and with all the effort she did with Vinitaly and then with the Wine Spectator, but mostly, dedicated on promoting our wines. So she's a great ambassador and she really likes it. So
Yeah,
we were
she's
talking about
really
passion
great.
before, So this is the clear example of somebody that does something with passion. So
Yeah, isn't it? She's
yeah,
really in the passion side. But unfortunately, I have to wrap it up, guys.
no problem.
So
Well,
sorry because it was
thanks,
such a nice
Beatrice.
interview.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Rosa, and thanks, Stevie. If you ever listen to this
she
podcast,
will.
She will,
remember
she
She
will.
listens to all
She
the
listened to
episodes.
you're
everything that we
great.
do. Yeah.
So Next time, anytime you need something, you just call me. If you wanna, I'm here.
Thank you a
That's
lot.
really amazing. Thank you so much. For those who are interested to participate, just send us a DM through our Instagram or mail our Italian Wine Podcast producer at info@italianwinepodcast.com. Thank you everyone for listening in, and thank you again, Giovanni and Rosa. That was such fun, really. It was amazing for me.
Yeah, for me too. It was fun. Thank
Ciao.
you.
Thank you a lot.
Thank you, ciao.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.
And that's
Talk
a
to you
wrap
soon.
from Italian Wine Podcast. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Listen to the Italian Wine Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We're on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Himalaya FM, and more. Don't forget to subscribe and rate the show. If you enjoy listening, please consider donating through ItalianWinePodcast.com. Any amount helps cover equipment, production, and publication costs. Until next time, Chin Chin.